there's another component to the ideology that I wanted to explore with you. And you might say I'm absolutely wrong to think this, but perhaps it's a little bit out there. But it's to do with the Second Vatican Council, and specifically the Nostra Aetate. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, the Latin. But so 1962 to 65, the Vatican come in with a bunch of reforms to the Catholic Church. And regarding the Jews, they completely go against, override an important part of, or a significant anti-Semitic part of pre-Vatican II Catholicism, which was blaming the Jews for Christ's death, deicide charge, as they call it, and they saw Jews as Christ killers. Now, what's that got to do with Ireland? Well, there weren't, unlike the rest of Europe, there had never been that many Jews in Ireland. So my looking into it was that it wasn't something that was given that much attention to in Ireland by those in the church, because there weren't so many Jews. I mean, we're talking a few thousand, I think.
Yeah.
And this pre-Vatican II Catholicism, where they do see the Jews as the perfidious Jews, I think is the term they use in Good Friday prayers. This Catholicism had an influence on the culture that maybe wasn't eradicated like it or snuffed out like it was elsewhere. As a side note, it's speculative, but I think some of the anti-Semitism we're seeing on the right coming out of America, I think it's because some of them are pre-Vatican II Catholics.
Right.
But I can only speculate that because I don't know the actual theology of these specific individuals in the commentariat that we're seeing. But that may be a conversation for another time. But do you think there's anything in this, the influence or the lack of influence of Vatican II in Ireland?
I do think there's something in it. I think, when people ask me what's Ireland's problem with Jews, I often say, and this is a bit of a simplistic explanation, but I think there's something in it. I think one of Ireland's problems is it went from one anti-Semitic religion to another. So it went from Catholicism. I'm not saying Catholicism is defined by its anti-Semitism at all.
Well, pre-Vatican II,
there was a lot of anti-Semitism. Yeah, absolutely. But it went from pre-Vatican II Catholicism, which dominated the country up to the 60s, to wokeness, which in my view is the new religion, and it's also anti-Semitic. So if you look at a country like Ireland that switches almost without taking a breath between that kind of ancient religion, which had this vision of Jews as the killers of Christ, the great deicides, the figure of Judas, for example. I've just read a book about the history of depictions of Judas in Western art, Western literature, Western churches. And Judas became the ultimate Jew. He's the figure of the Jew. He always was made to look very Jewish. In paintings, he was seen as, the great traitor, the betrayer of Christ, and the Jews screwed up Christ's life and Christ's mission. That was the story that lots of Catholics were told, certainly pre-Vatican II. And
his name doesn't help, yeah.
Well, and so they go from a religion that saw the Jews as Christ killers to this new religion that sees the Jews as Palestinian killers, child killers, as the intentional, rabid, bloodlusting destroyers of Palestinian life. Mm-hmm. And, the thing that always strikes me about Israelophobia, and I talk about this in my book After the Pogrom, is the way in which hatred for Israel today so closely mimics hatred for the Jews in the past.
How so?
Well, all the things that people used to say about the Jewish people, they now say about the Jewish nation. So they used to say the Jewish people loved to kill children. They drained their blood, the blood libel. They drained their blood. They used it to make bread. They drank it. They were, they loved to kill Christian children. Now we see that mimicked and rehabilitated in the idea that Israel, unique among the nations of the world, targets children for death. It loves to kill children. You see that prejudice all over the place. Also, the idea that the Jews were a uniquely perfidious people, a uniquely barbarous people, that has been rehabilitated in the hatred for the Jewish nation. Owen Jones in The Guardian described Israel's war in Gaza as uniquely murderous unique among the evils of the world is this war in Gaza.
It's not even the most uniquely murdered.
No.
The death toll isn't even compared to what's going on in Ukraine. So
Not
it's
at
not
all.
even right now, is it not the most?
Absolutely.
As far as I don't accept that it is murder.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Exactly. Even by death toll, it's not comparable to any of these other conflicts. And then when you look back to the war in the Congo, for example, which no one talks about, in which millions died, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So that's another ancient libel, ancient form of bigotry that's been rehabilitated in Israelophobia. And then, of course, the old idea that the Jews were a manipulative people, very powerful, kind of puppeteering world affairs, that's been 100% rebuilt on the altar of Israelophobia. This idea that the Jewish nation has America and Britain eaten out of the palms of its hands. It's the secret controller of world events. And, it's you also see it in this notion that, when people in Europe, in medieval Europe, who at least had the excuse of being uneducated and couldn't read, they were illiterate and they were farmers and they lived in towns and they were not particularly enlightened people. When they saw the Jews as the pox in their own lives. If their crops failed, they would blame Jewish people. If someone went missing, they'd say the Jews took that person. If they ran out of money, they'd say it's because the Jews are moneylenders. They're hoarding everything. The Jews were the explanation for everything that went wrong in their own lives. We now see that in relation to the Jewish nation. And you're right to raise the problem of the right, because we see it on the right as well as the left. This notion that if only Israel didn't exist, we'd have world peace. If only Israel didn't exist, we could really have America first and we could really sort out America's problems. If only Israel didn't exist, then, you wouldn't have all these tensions in Europe and all these kind of conflicts and between Muslims and Jews and everything else. The Jewish nation has been redefined as the source of all the world's ills in the way that the Jewish people were once seen as the source of all the world's ills. So, anti-Semitism is a very unique form of racism because it's not just bigotry against a group of people on the basis of their heritage or their skin color. And we can all agree all forms of racism are wicked. It's not just that. It's a search for evil. It treats the Jewish people, or today the Jewish nation, as a cauldron of evil, as the source of evil, as the force that is undermining civilized life, undermining democratic life, undermining everyday life. That's how the Jews were once seen, and that's now how the Jewish state is seen. And to me, it cannot be a coincidence that all the bile and bigotry that was once visited on the Jewish people is now openly visited on the Jewish state.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.